Wealth mirrors health. Have you ever noticed that the principles that govern our financial well-being actually mirror the principles for our physical well-being? That if you've mastered the area of finances in your life, you're actually not that far off from mastering your health. You're not that far off from mastering your longevity. Now, maybe you're looking at this and saying, yeah, I have a business, I have a career, I have advanced in this one area, but I can't figure out how to take care of myself. I can't figure out how to be consistent and build up these habits. If that's where you're at, then we're going to show you how these areas actually intersect, how they mirror each other, and how you can start making simple changes to the way you think about your fitness so you can advance and have the two in parallel for life. My name is Brian Pickowitz.
And I'm Lindsay Pickowitz, and we are the head coaches and the co-founders at The Fitness Project. Now, at The Fitness Project, we work with a lot of very successful individuals. They have net worth, they have wealth, they have a business or a great career, they have a beautiful family, but that last piece of their puzzle is their health. They have sacrificed their health in order to create success in all of these areas. And a lot of times that's left them short on energy, short on the capacity that they need in order to keep advancing and keep growing and keep living a full life. And that's where we step in and we help them. Now, for us personally, we attended an incredible event this weekend that actually sparked the inspiration for this podcast specifically, called Wealth Mastery. This is a 4-day event with Tony Robbins and his team, where basically you're diving into the principles of wealth, and not just how to invest, but specifically how do you build this whole identity of wealth? How do you mentally, emotionally, and financially really create wealth for yourself? As we were going through this whole weekend, I kept saying out loud to Brian, and we kept mirroring back to each other, oh my gosh, I can't believe how similar this is to fitness. I can't believe how almost identical these principles are. I've never pulled that together. And so after we finished the weekend a couple days ago, we thought, man, we have to make a podcast about this, and not just sharing our experience about wealth mastery or how the event was, but like specifically for you, someone who has mastered this area of finances or wealth. You understand the basics and the principles, but can't figure out fitness. It's like, you're so close. If we can just help you transfer those principles for success in that financial area to your physical health and your fitness, you will be smooth sailing. So that's really what we want to do. We want to give you those key laws of wealth and really move them over to your health.
Well, the fascinating thing is, it's always been present. Like, I've always talked to a lot of my business owner clients and said, hey, look at the numbers. Think about the numbers. How do you think about numbers when it comes to your business? All right, can we translate that over to your health, right? And so a lot of these principles are things that we've taught for years, and they're going to really make a lot of sense once we start introducing you to them, right? So like Lindsay said, these are laws. These are things that govern not just our financial well-being, but they govern our health. They govern our physical well-being. And that first law is the power of compounding. Now, we've all seen on a spreadsheet how we'll be millionaires when we're 70, right? Like, oh, if I take $1,000 and I invest it over time, when does that reach $1 million, right? Or how can I compound it, X, Y, Z? That's because there's so much power in compound interest, right? There's a great story about Ben Franklin. When he died, he left Boston and Philadelphia, I think, $1,000. And that was in 1792, right? I want to say 1792. But the only rule is they couldn't touch it for 100 years. And he knew that was because it was going to compound. By the time they could touch it, I think it was like $1 million, $1,000 to $1 million. And so there's so much power financially in compounding. Well, what about our health? Well, if you are healthy in your 20s and 30s, it shows up in your 60s, especially if you did decently in your 40s and 50s. I tell a lot of our clients, like, yeah, we all know the 1% rule, 1% compounds over time. In a year, you'll be 38% better. But when we have someone who's in like their 40s or 50s, I said, you need to think that you're taking care of your 70-year-old self. You need to think you're taking care of your 80-year-old self, because being strong in your 50s is going to enhance your 80s so much more than anything else. The leading indicator for early onset mortality is actually the loss of muscle mass. It's the loss of muscle mass because you lose your independence. You can't stand up. You can't pick things up. When you have less muscle mass, you actually lose bone density, right? And so you fall, you break your hip. That's how people end up dying when they're older. So I share that because you can start seeing how there's compounding effects to what you do today. What you do today in your health isn't just about losing weight fast, right? It's not just about, oh my gosh, did I lose 20 pounds in a week or a month? It's like, no, you have to think for the long term, and you have to invest in your time today for that long-term return of who you're going to be as you age.
Yeah, and I was actually speaking with somebody about this today, I think. Maybe it was yesterday. But this idea and this whole mindset around the power of compounding is so powerful, especially when you look at how you got to where you are with your health today. Let's say that right now you are 30 pounds overweight. You don't really have any routines in place for working out, and your eating is very sporadic, and you're just really tired. Like, you wake up tired, you're tired around 2 p.m., and you're exhausted by the end of the day. You don't really have much to give at the end, and so you're kind of just in this vicious cycle of being too tired to change anything. A lot of the times when you're in that position, the really tempting thing is, oh, I just got to do it. Like, I just get myself in gear. I just got to go. It really doesn't work like that. And the reason is because of this law of compounding. Because essentially, you didn't get here overnight. Like, you didn't even get here in a week. You didn't even get here, I guarantee, in a year. I guarantee it took at least several years, if not a decade, of slowly stopping taking care of yourself and slowly replacing those self-care habits with unhealthy habits. And this is the outcome of that type of compounding, of unhealthy habits compounded over a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, a decade. And now you're tired. So the truth is, regardless of where you are, what specifically that looks like, you have to give yourself the reality that you're not going to reverse that overnight. Just like you can't say, oh, I hope $1 million falls out of the sky so I can invest it in the stock market, right? You actually have to start putting money in from where you are today, and it will compound over time. So translate that mindset over to health and say, okay, well, the most important thing is that I can start to compound in the other direction. And that's actually what's going to make you successful with your health, rather than feeling like you need to smack yourself with a 5-day workout plan and a crazy restrictive diet. It's the law of compounding over time with your habits that gets you healthy.
And when it comes to compounding, kind of similar to what Lindsay's saying, think of someone, maybe think of yourself when you first started investing, right? Oh my gosh, like I have to save money. I remember sitting in a McDonald's when I first started my first business. This is my junior year in college. I didn't have a workspace. I was personally training people out of a small gym. I started my first business in a McDonald's, and I would go there in between clients because it was the only place that had Wi-Fi in our town. And I remember reading Money Master the Game by Tony, and it talked about building a savings account. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to save money. I can't just like spend it, right? So I remember putting away like $100 every paycheck. Small. It was so small at the time. But now that's that's very small, right? Compared to what I would consider investing now. But it started from a very small amount. So again, same way with fitness. You got to meet yourself where you're at, and you got to start small, right? So money, you got to start small sometimes. You got to start small, and then eventually the same principles are in place, just the amounts change. Yep. Same thing with going to the gym, right? You just show up at the gym. All right, I'm in the gym. Okay, well, tomorrow I'm going to go to the gym again. Once you're there, though, you can run a mile or you can lift the heavier weight. It gets better over time. So you got to keep the small win principle, right? We talk about it so much, 1% better every day. It's not just in regards to your health. It's in regards to everything you want to improve. Now, if we're looking at compounding, right, we have to also understand that that's like the foundational principle. The second law, though, is how we think, right? Because who you believe you are in relation to your health becomes your life.
Yeah,
right?
It stays your life if you don't address it. There was an exercise that we did over the weekend, which is basically what was your financial story, right? Like, what was the story? Where did you develop these ideas around wealth or money? Like, what were your reference points when you were growing up or a young adult? And as you start to write down that story, it becomes really obvious how that story sticks with you until you bring it to your awareness and bring it to the surface and start to say, like, wait, is that how I want to keep living? Is that still true for me today? And so the question is almost, you can ask yourself this because your thoughts do become your reality, is like, what is your health story? Like, what's the story that's been driving this particular area of life? Now, an example of this might be, and I'll give my health story as my old health story as a background. So before I got in great shape, before I learned all these principles that I share with our clients every day, I had this whole story around health, weight loss, fitness, well-being that basically was like, there's food and then there's dieting. There's good food and bad food, and then there's dieting where you're only eating the good foods. And exercise really was difficult. It made my face red. It made me uncomfortable, and I didn't really like it. And that was kind of my whole story. And then as I went through young adulthood, I was the person who was always gaining and losing weight. I was the person who was always overeating whenever I had sweets in front of me. I was a sweets person. I loved ice cream and brownies. And this was like my whole identity, was this constant battle of how much do I weigh, and I need to lose weight, and I need to get leaner, and I'm the fat friend. And it was like this whole belief system that stemmed from the way that I grew up and what I learned. And what's really powerful about understanding that old story is then you get to ask yourself, well, what's the new story? What do I want my story to be? Do I want that to be my whole life? Right? I talk to people in their 60s who reference their parents in their 80s and 90s who say, my mom is 90 and she is still worried about her diet and how much she weighs. It's like, whew, yeah, this will literally be your whole life unless you rewrite the story. Mm-hmm. So I would ask you, what is your health story? What is the story that's been driving you in this area? What do you say to yourself? What do you believe about this past history, this book that's been written for you with regard to your health? What are your references? Maybe actually take some time to write that down and then ask yourself, well, what would I like my story to be? What's the news story? And for me, again, to give you an example, my new health story is, yeah, just like I told you, that was maybe chapter 1, but then the rest of my story has been, and I took control of my health. I built my dream body. I learned how to be not just fit, but I learned how to be well. Mm-hmm. I learned how to understand my mental health, how to understand my emotions. I learned how to tap into my faith at such a deep level that keeps me grounded and steady. And that stemmed from learning how to build my dream body. And that's my whole story, is it was this grand ripple effect that happened across my life because I took control of my physical body and my health and my relationship with fitness. And that's my new story. And now I teach it to people. And so does Brian, right? We teach it to hundreds of people. So that's my new story. For you right now, what would you like to be your story? What are those new beliefs that you'd like to have about yourself? Write those down, and that's really going to create a lot of power for you and a lot of drive.
Well, and I want to build off that too, because I think that I'll use a more masculine example. Sometimes our old story needs to be upgraded, right? And it might have served you at one point, right? So I work with a lot of men who feel like they need to be lean and 12% body fat in order to be confident. And it's like, that's great. You can accomplish that, and I'll help you do that. But when you're 55 and you keep getting hurt, it's like, well, maybe that story needs to be upgraded, right? Maybe that story needs to change, right? So it's similar to our financial story. It's like, well, maybe you actually are successful now, right? So sometimes with wealth and money, it's like, there's never enough. There's never enough. It's like, well, when will there be enough? Can you define that part of your story? Right? So when you think of health, maybe you have an old story like, oh, I need to be this percent of body fat in order to, get it done, or I need to work out this many days. Maybe there's something really aggressive that actually keeps you from making progress. Right? I see a lot of people who are like, oh my God, I used to be an athlete and I used to be able to do this, and now I can't do it anymore. Oh, I am a piece of, I'm a piece of shit. Right? Look at me. And it's like, well, Maybe that story needs to change. Maybe you can get back there, but maybe right now you don't need to.
Yeah.
So we have to understand the story. The story drives our actions. And if we're not conscious of it, then it's going to govern our life.
Yep.
And this is a really powerful exercise that we gain from it. But again, little things like, hey, what does health mean to you right now? What is health not, right? Some little questions you can start asking yourself, and we'll continue to build off that as we kind of go.
Yeah.
The third law, though, if we understand that, yes, compounding effect, we need to make changes, or there's a diminishing return on compounding as well. If we don't make changes, we understand our story, we understand the things that we're thinking about. The third thing is we have to master the fundamentals, right? So you have to master the fundamentals with your money in order to build wealth. You have to, make some money. Right? The first law of wealth is, do you make some income? Because if you don't have money coming in, you can't save it, you can't invest it. There are also principles like you got to make sure you're saving, right? You got to save, you got to spend less than what you make. You also need to make sure you don't get into bad debt, right? Simple things Dave Ramsey teaches. But you also need to save and invest, because if you're just saving, you're losing every year, especially nowadays. I mean, even if you have a high yield savings account, you're still losing because of inflation. So you need to become an owner. You need to become an investor, right? Really basic principles. And obviously, the best investment you can make is in yourself, right? These are all financial fundamentals, if you will. Well, what are the fundamentals we have to master with our health? Well, we have to sleep, right? We have to make sure that we're sleeping. A lot of people pride themselves on not being sleepers. I will tell you, I am someone who my whole life since I was a kid has struggled with their sleep. And I have to work at it. I literally have to every night think, am I ready to sleep? If not, I need to put my phone away and relax. Maybe I need to go for a walk. Maybe I need to read. Maybe I need to journal. It has to be that thing I focus on. Because not sleeping, especially as a man, massive declines in testosterone health. If you do not sleep, I can't remember the statistic, but Matt Walker talks about it. It's something along the lines of 1 night of disrupted sleep increases your likelihood of having cancer by something like 30%. Don't quote me on the exact amount, but he talks about it oftentimes on podcasts like Amateur Huberman and different reference points. So you got to sleep, right? More than you got to eat right. It's like you got to be sleeping. It's so vital. Second thing we have to do is we have to move our body, right? Now, ideally, we're strength training because it's going to increase our longevity. Ideally, we're doing some kind of cardiovascular training, but we need to make sure that we're moving, right? We have to master that fundamental. It just has to be a part of our day, especially in an inactive world where we're sitting all day long at a computer. It's like this isn't normal for humans. This is not how we're meant to function. We need to move. Third thing is we need to put healthy food in our body. Now, again, talking about food stories, like health stories, maybe you believe that eating healthy is boring. I remember growing up, there was this one of my ex-girlfriends, her uncle was incredibly healthy. Just the guy was disciplined and he was a vegan and all this stuff. And I was like, this is the first time I've ever met someone who is really healthy. And I kind of thought he was weird. And now people probably look at me and think I'm weird because it kind of altered my story of what I thought healthy meant. So I started to kind of build off of that. Now, when I say healthy whole foods, what does it mean to you? Doesn't mean you have to eat broccoli and chicken every meal, but you do need to master that as a fundamental. And then the last piece is you need to make sure you have quality relationships, right? We don't talk enough about that. Your relationships, that's a fundamental for your health. The people you spend time with, if they're sucking the life out of you, they're draining you, man, you're not going to be healthy. And you're also going to have them influence you. And the last thing I would say is a fundamental, right, is make sure you're hydrated. Don't put poison in your body, right? Don't drink a lot of alcohol. You can have some if you want. I love my whiskey sours. I love a little bit of wine, but I don't have to drink every night, right? I don't have to have that as a pillar in my life. Don't smoke, right? Don't smoke cigarettes. Be mindful. Being mindful of what you put in your body that doesn't need to be there. And again, hydrate. These are little things that we can just focus on daily. It's really not that hard once you start to say, hey, this is a fundamental thing I just don't do because it's not part of it. Like I don't go spend $3,000 on something I don't need and put it on my credit card. It's just not there. It's not even on my mind at this point, right? If I'm going to use my credit cards to invest in something that's going to make me a higher return, I know I can pay it off soon. So these same principles, man, they just mirror each other, but you got to be conscious of them. Yeah. And then you got to make sure that you just simplify it. Right? These are all simple things that we can do and that we can start to live through our life, but they mirror each other incredibly well. Anything you would add?
Yeah, no, I think in summary, like we said, there's really three main laws. And the great thing about laws is that they're in place for a reason, right? If we're looking at laws or rules, a lot of people will say rules are meant to be broken, and they have this rebellious spirit about them, and I honor that as a former rebel. But
She's still a rebel.
but the truth is laws are in place because they should govern our behavior, and they should govern our behavior for the well-being of you and everyone around you. If we're looking at the basics of that singular word, right? They're really in place for a reason. And if you have laws, then again, you know how to conduct yourself. And if you understand that, hey, habits compound over time, we're not going to course correct this overnight. Just like I'm not going to bet that I'm going to win the lottery someday to be wealthy. No, you put principles in place that build and compound over time. And if you understand that what you believe, what you put in your brain about your health becomes your reality, and you really understand that is a law, then you're going to be much more intentional with the stories you tell yourself, with the beliefs that you let float around in your head about whether or not it's something you can do, whether or not you can be healthy, whether or not you can lose weight. It's like, well, if you believe you can, you will. If you believe you don't, you won't. So if we come back to laws and basics, that holds power. And third, if you understand and you believe the law of fundamentals, then it makes it so much simpler to be wealthy, to be healthy. And that ripples across every area of your life. There's one last thing that I'll share, and we'll put this kind of graphic on the screen, but Tony Robbins has this pyramid of mastery that he starts his events with, and it really is true. And we'll show you, but basically it states that the absolute foundation of your life is your physical body, is your physical health. And why is that? Well, if you don't have your physical health, well, one, you die, right? You die early, you die whatever you'd quantify as, of whether it's too soon, too late, whatever. But if you don't have your physical body, your spirit can't go very far, right? And there's anomalies. There's people who have outlived and created massive impact without their body. Stephen Hawking, for example. But the vast majority of people need their physical health. They need their physical vitality and their energy in order to do good in the world. And of course, to live a fulfilled, beautiful life. And then second, just above that is emotions, right? Your emotional well-being, the meaning that you give the things that you do. And that's, again, like we talked about, that's a lot of that story, those beliefs about yourself, about your health, about your well-being that govern your life. If those aren't in place, then you're unstable, you're uncertain, you're insecure, and that bleeds into everything else. And then third, just above that is your relationships, like Brian was talking about. Proximity is power in either direction, right? Those you're closest with, you become. And if you can't influence them, they say that you have to have 5 positive friends for every negative one, right? Well, if you don't have those 5 people pulling you, then you're going to end up becoming that negative friend. And that, again, ripples into everything. And then above that is time. How you manage your time. Do you feel like you have an abundance of time? Do you feel like your time is always crunched? You're always down to the wire. You're always late. You're always this. You're always that. That puts so much stress on you. And that actually impacts everything above and below time. If you feel rushed all the time, it's very hard to be mentally clear and for you to take care of your body. From there, it's your mission, your work and career. And then above that is your finances. And then above that is your ability to contribute, your quality of your celebration of how you actually believe you're doing, right? How you celebrate that. But at the root of it all is your health. You have to have your health. And to tell yourself otherwise is setting you up for your older self to be in pain.
Yeah. What good is your money if you can't use it? What good is your money if you don't have your health? If you're in pain, if you're miserable, right? We're all going to die, right? What do you get to take with you, right? What do you get to take with you when you die? Nothing, right? So to be suffering in your body and not taking care of yourself, if you have the money, if you have the wealth, if you have the financial well-being, or even if it's like, hey, I need to start investing in this a little bit more, right? It's like, this is useless if I do not have the ability to have an enriched life. And what you'll find too, which is amazing, is the more health you have, the easier wealth becomes, right? Even Warren Buffett, he's like, Warren Buffett's like, and you talk about how this impacts your emotional well-being, right? Warren Buffett's like, oh, I tap dance to work. I love my life. And he's like, I've never had an argument with Charlie Munger, who was his late business partner. They worked together for like 60 years. So I never had an argument with him. It shows him his emotional well-being. And he's like, oh, well, what's your least favorite part of what you do? He's like, the only thing I don't like is when my trainer comes over 3 days a week. He was still working out in his 90s. He's still, I believe he still is, but he's still had a trainer. Doesn't mean he liked it. He's just like, it's a fundamental thing I got to do if I want to have a quality of life. Mm-hmm. So you got to understand that it's so important to take care of your body. And I'll tie this down with a Warren Buffett quote. He's like, I want you to imagine that I give you any car you wanted. He came to me and said, hey, Warren, he's teaching a group of students, like kids, like 18 years old. So I give you any car you wanted. Any car you wanted at all. But the rule is that car has to last you for life. What would you do? You'd probably clean it. You'd probably make sure the tires had the right pressure. You'd bring it in for an oil change. You would take care of that car because it's the only car you had to drive. He's like, that same principle is how you want to think about your body, how you think about your mind, how you think about taking care of yourself, because you only get one vehicle. Now, Warren Buffett loves his McDonald's, loves his cheeseburgers, but there's something to be said for understanding that principle that wealth and health, they do mirror each other. They are very much one of the same. And we talk about having a life well lived, you need your health. And if you're understanding the principles that got you here to be financially sound, start asking, how can I move those principles over to my physical body, my physical well-being? And I think that's where you'll start to see that there's a lot of parallels.
And before you leave this podcast, you click off. What can you do today? If you understand that rule of compounding, then start with some really simple healthy habits. Walk 2,000 steps today, maybe more than you normally do, which is 1 mile. Eat one more healthy meal than you would. Don't wait until 6 p.m. to eat, even if it's 6 p.m. right now. Get something healthy in your body, or hydrate, right? Get to sleep. Do one healthy thing. What is that one thing going to be? You decide before you click off. We always make sure our clients leave with a takeaway. They don't just leave and forget everything that they just listened to or everything that they just absorbed. So what is your one thing? And as we close for today, we hope this has been insightful for you. We hope you've had some light bulbs, some ahas. And we hope that you'll join us in future episodes of Conquer the Day. If you know somebody who this is going to resonate a lot with, maybe a fellow careerman or business owner, send this their way, share the wealth with them, and that way they can get healthy with you. And with that said, go out and conquer your day.
Cheers.